Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very special honor for me to do these introductions today. Especially I'm honored that His Excellency Mr. Jalil Abbas Jilani is here today. This is his second visit in 6 weeks with PRI, and we are really honored by the interest of the government of Pakistan, and especially the interest that he brings to the work that we do. He has a very unique career. He was our foreign secretary before this posting, and is probably one of the few career foreign service officers who's been posted as ambassador to the United States, which is a huge appointment for us, and that bears testimony to his excellence and his interest. So I want to thank you, sir. My role is just in terms of introducing what's going to happen today, and there are a lot of people that are signed in so they can hear my voice. This is also being taped, and we're going to use these videos as teaching materials in the universities that we're working with in Pakistan. Because this, to me, is one of the greatest panels on agriculture policy analysis, and both academically and in terms of the research and policy interface that you can put together anywhere in the world, and I will describe this in a moment. So, Excellency, welcome. Other members of the embassy, welcome. Distinguished guests from USAID with long connections to Pakistan, Mr. Kovac is there, and others. Welcome, and this means a lot to us. It is my special honor to introduce the chairperson for today's meeting. Professor John Mellor brought prominence to the role of agriculture on the road to industrialization. His paper in 1961 actually set the scene for the development of our profession. He brought fame to his alma mater, Cornell, and especially the Center for International Studies, and then the international programs on agriculture while he was the professor there at Cornell University, famous. He brought fame to USAID for its focus on agriculture and the small farmers in the early 70s when he was chief economist at USAID. And then he took IFPRI, which he came to head, which was then a very small institution, to become one of the world leaders in this area of policy research and analysis. So we are especially honored that he's here. He has maintained, each one of the panelists here has a unique interest in Pakistan that spans several decades and continues even to this day. Professor Mellor, Your Excellency, has just finished on behalf of IFPRI, providing input into the draft National Food Security and Agriculture Policy, which has been completed by the Ministry of Food Security and Policy. So, and his interest in this continues. Professor Jock Anderson, again, one of the international leaders in our profession. His work on agriculture decision analysis brought quantitative economics and the focus on risk and uncertainty into decision making. And then his subsequent work looking at agriculture research systems and evaluation, and later his work both as an academic, where he held very unique positions, and then at the World Bank, where he was eventually the advisor for strategy, is universally acclaimed. He was, he is also, in fact, there is a bias, at least. There are 3 people here who are my teachers, and 2 that I'm connected with through my alma mater as well. And I'm privileged to have known Jock for the last, since the late 70s, when he was the youngest chief economist of the Bureau of Ag Economics of Australia. And that was a position that had just started, I think, because of him. So Derek Wiley, who is sitting there, again, an international leader in this area, went, I think, from Adelaide to the University of New England and then to the Oregon State University before he started as an academic at Michigan State. But his greatest role has been as director of the economic program at CIMMET, the Center for International Research on Raising. And what I want to share with this audience, apart from his other work and the fact that he was the team leader on the World Development Report on Agriculture, he has left large numbers of students, proteges that he mentored in every country, including Pakistan. And I want to share with you that several Director Generals and members of the PARC and the NARC and people that became chairman of the Punjab Agriculture Research Board benefited from his mentoring at that stage. He spent several years keenly involved in the development of Pakistan's research in agriculture. So, Madhur Gautam currently leads the World Bank's effort in this area. As a lead economist for South Asia, focusing on Pakistan, has done a lot of work in this area. Interestingly, also has an IFPRI connection, and I keep introducing people as IFPRI babies, but that's because of my advancing years, I think. But Madhur, again, his most recent work has been this focus on agriculture and water policy on behalf of the World Bank in Pakistan last year. And I thought that provides a very fascinating mix. And then at the other end of the panel is David Spielman, and he is a senior research fellow here. But he has a very unique connection to Pakistan. He is as Pakistani as I am. And in fact, his seniority and his academic status belie his age. When the first Pakistan IFPRI USAID program was being run at about that time, he was a high school student in Islamabad and interning in the agriculture office of USAID. And it's been my privilege to know all of these gentlemen for the last 35 or 40 years, and for their contribution to Pakistan and their commitment they've given up, whatever they're doing to come here. Pakistan needs support in the area of sound policy analysis so that the policy making can be made more effective. And in agriculture, it's all the more needed because it has become, unfortunately, the neglected sector for several reasons, including the fact that there is a huge skewed distribution of power and access to decision making in Pakistan that precludes. So for us to generate the science that makes for these decision making is very important. And IFPRI has had a long term, as you know, standing in Pakistan going back to the late 80s. Currently we have a multi-year program called the Pakistan Strategy Support Program, where we are working with the Planning Commission and Professor Ahsan Iqbal, who has been here several times, and in fact we'll have a meeting coming up on the 27th with him to look at how best this work feeds into. But agriculture is also a misunderstood sector in Pakistan, because when you talk about agriculture and all the policies, etc., they're pitched at a very aggregate level, and we forget the huge disparities across situations, locations, the weakness of the institutions, the weak linkages, the market linkages that are not developed for a number of reasons, etc. Professor Meller made this famous statement. He said, in countries where agriculture grows quickly, the share of agriculture declines even more rapidly. In Pakistan, the share of agriculture has declined. It's now about 20%, but agriculture has not grown to its true potential. And that is a challenge. And this 20% of value added supports 47% of the labor force. So we're caught in a situation of very low productivity. One of the other things that people miss is that the average size of farm in Pakistan has declined rapidly. And this is something that gets missed out in the statistics. In 1960, according to the agriculture census, only 19% of the total farms were less than 5 acres. there was a huge cohort of these middle and middle to semi-large farms. In the 2010 census, 67% of all farms are less than 5 acres. And in this, it's the less than 5 acres, the averages are even more alarming. The average size is only about 2.2 acres. And that varies. In the KPK, it's only 1.5 acres. So when you design a policy that's meant for these large farms, or it's meant for an ideal situation where we say there is this huge potential, we forget all the aspects that go with that small size, the lack of access to resources, to science, to facilities, markets, the need actually to be doing a range of other things just to sustain the family unit. And this declining size is also accompanied with fragmentation. So this 1.5 acres in KPK is spread all over the place, and that causes lots of degradation in terms of neglect of certain parcels and etc. But I can go on and on and on about this. I'm sorry, that was not my purpose. The way in which this is structured, I'm going to request Paul to say a few words of welcome, and then Schengen, and then I'll leave it to Professor Meller. But the three panelists will speak, and then Derek will give his expert comments, and then we'll open it to the floor, and then Professor Meller will conclude the session. Thank you so much for this opportunity, sir. Thank you.
Well, Ambassador, friends, particularly some of the old friends here like Jock, Derek, I'm not sure I can claim to be friend of John Mellon. He was my predecessor here at April. And Madhu, I can claim Madhu is
We're not
friend.
unfriendly, right?
So I think I had some sort of competing event today. I was supposed to be in another session, nutrition, agriculture and nutrition. Obviously, they provide very nutritious food. But here, it's a Pakistani food. They are attracting me here. So I have enjoyed the Pakistani food, although it's a bit spicy to me. So, well, thank you for coming. I think that Pakistan is a country where they are still struggling with agriculture, with so many development challenges. So I do not want to claim to be expert, but IPRI is very much committed to work with Pakistani collaborators to strengthen country's capacity to do young policy research. So the capacity building is key, and Paul will talk more about that. So until country's capacity is built, the country will not be able to lead, to drive its own development programs. Until a country owns, drive, and lead its own development programs, the country will not succeed in promoting its agricultural growth, its poverty reduction, and hunger reduction. Yeah, I know you are all the experts on Pakistani agriculture. I wanted to challenge you on a couple of issues. One is obviously the size of small farm. I know John Mellor many years ago claimed that small is beautiful. Is small still beautiful today? Yeah, look at the size. So he'll mention that the size of the farm has even declined, over the last I don't know how many years. How can we make sure that the size can be more friendly, can promote a healthy growth? Second, I know Pakistan is pursuing a self-sufficiency policy, trade, investment, and others. Can we change that objective to nutrition? Agriculture is developed for improving people's nutrition. Obviously, jobs, smallholders' income, and so on. So nutrition, can we do that? And then obviously, I know for the last several years, I have observed that Pakistan has experienced several rounds of natural disasters, floods, droughts. What is the impact on agriculture? And how agriculture can adapt to that? Or maybe in the future, how Pakistani agriculture, and together with other countries, can help to mitigate the climate change. Agriculture accounts for almost 30% of the greenhouse gas emission. So today, agriculture has more job to do than just producing enough grains, wheat, or rice, or whatever you introduce that. So but for this, I'm looking forward to the experts' opinion. So I wanted to save some time to listen to you. Thank you very much.
I'd like just to tell you very briefly about the Pakistan Strategy Support Program. This program is financed by USAID. It's a 4-year program. We're starting our 4th year. We hope to continue as we go. But IFPRI has a long history in Pakistan, including a major USAID project funded in the mid-'80s. Sohail Malik was actually the director of the survey work in Pakistan at that time. A panel household survey was started that has actually continued to this day. And so that funding by AID, that support, has enabled IFPRI to work with the government of Pakistan, to work with researchers, to be involved with capacity strengthening. The current project's doing a lot of survey work. We have analysis of that survey data, other micro data, macro analysis. We've got a competitive grants program run in Pakistan. Professor David Orden is leading that. And a major effort at capacity strengthening. So and this is part of that program. So again, I just want to welcome you here and thank you for coming. Bahut shukriya.
I also wanted to basically come to listen to the experts who have in the past contributed significantly to the debate. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sohail Malik, the Director General, IFPRI, and all our colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is always a pleasure visiting IFPRI and taking part in the deliberations. I was, as Dr. Sohail Malik mentioned, I was here only 6 weeks ago to again be a part of an important discussion on the recent floods that we had in Pakistan and the kind of damage that it caused. I think this is a timely discussion on the agriculture sector in Pakistan, which certainly remains the mainstay of Pakistan's economy. As I think would be discussed, this sector employs about 45% of Pakistan's total workforce and accounts for about 21.4% of our GDP. Pakistan's exports are also agro-based. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, Pakistan is world's largest producers of quinoa citrus fruit, third largest producer of dates, fifth largest producer of mangoes, cotton, milk, and home to third largest animal herd. 10% of world's rice trade is also that takes place in Pakistan. Incidentally, the quinoa, which is one of the best citrus fruits, that was developed at the University of California many years ago, and certainly that now forms part of a very important agriculture exports of Pakistan. And hopefully by next year, while we are going to have mangoes selling in most of the stores in the US, we will also get quinoas. That export will also start. This is something that is part of our ongoing discussions with the US side. Long-term sustainable growth driven by agriculture certainly would help make Pakistan a prosperous, secure and peaceful society that will in turn contribute to promoting a regional stability. That's why our government gives highest priority to this important sector. All key planning documents, including the poverty reduction strategy paper, have traditionally paid significant attention to the role of agriculture. And our Vision 2025 document, that also recognizes that sufficient, reliable, clean and cost-effective availability of energy, water and food is indispensable to ensure sustainable economic growth and development. Agriculture again has been a key area of collaboration between Pakistan and the US. Many of us farmers in Pakistan, we fondly remember the contributions made by Dr. Norman Borlaug, who brought about an agriculture revolution in the country, and he is genuinely known as the father of the agriculture revolution in Pakistan. And even today, if you visit any village in Pakistan, people, they do remember his contribution and fondly remember him for the kind of job that he had done. Happily, once again, there is a renewed focus on agriculture, and Pakistan, in collaboration with the USAID, we are working on a number of agriculture projects in Pakistan. These projects, they include Balochistan Agriculture Project, Pakistan Agriculture Policy Program, Pakistan Dairy Project, Grain Storage Program, and Commercial Agriculture Support Program. And with the help of the USAID and the US government, USDA, we have launched a scheme to give farmers innovative technologies, improved variety of seeds, and modern techniques. This is an ambitious program, and under this program, one research center, a world-class high research center, is also being established in Pakistan. The list of areas where Pakistan would like to seek international cooperation and support are obviously many. I would, however, list a few of those areas. For instance, we seek to increase our productivity through a proper infusion of technology from appropriate farm machinery to high quality, high yield, and disease-resistant seeds. Additionally, we would like to focus not only on the plant side of agriculture, but also on the livestock side of it. Dairy and poultry sector in Pakistan hold great promise, and we would like to capitalize on their potential. Pakistan is also, as you're all aware, is a water-stressed country. Global warming and shifting weather patterns are making rainfall more unpredictable. This adds to our problems. We therefore need expertise, knowledge, and assistance in the management of our water resources. This would also include building dams, lining of canals, and irrigation water channels, irrigation technologies, etc. In this regard, we are also thankful to the US side for their support on two important dams which are now under construction. One is the Dasu hydroelectric power project, and the other one is the Amir Pasha Dam project. An underappreciated aspect of Pakistan's agriculture is obviously agribusiness and supply chain management. Food processing and packaging can also help Pakistan extract the maximum benefit from its agriculture produce. Similarly, disaster preparedness and prevention is another area requiring our immediate attention because of the successive devastating floods in Pakistan. In this regard, I think it would also be imperative to introduce the concept of crop insurance, which certainly is not very widespread at the moment. Similarly, the agro-based exports from Pakistan to the US and other European markets, we are trying to explore markets not only in the US but also Europe and Australia. For instance, in Australia, some of the products, agriculture products which were previously not on the positive list have been added on the positive list. Again, because of the improved technologies which were introduced with the help of not only by the government of Australia but also by the US government. And the export of mangoes is one such example in which we not only receive good technology and support from the US side but also other countries which have helped us in getting these mangoes in the Pakistani market. Enhanced access to our textile products in the US market is again something which can help millions of cotton growers in the country. And this is one aspect that I keep discussing it with members of the Congress, with the US administration, that enhanced market access to Pakistani products because of the devastation we have suffered on account of natural disasters, and also on account of the damages to our economy that we have suffered on account of terrorism. That is something that would certainly enhance the capacity of Pakistani, not only Pakistani farmers, but also bring about economic progress. I think the research is again an area which is of tremendous importance. We hope that the newly established working group between Pakistan and the US on education and science and technology would certainly focus on this area of research. And here I would also like to mention that we also need to develop a culture of sharing best practices between the countries of the region, because in certain areas, we have done some good research in the Agriculture University of Faisalabad, and similarly some of the agriculture universities in India, where we have similar crop patterns, similar weather conditions. They have also done some good research work, particularly on the diseases that are there. So I think that is another area of good collaboration that we need to have in the agriculture. Once again, thank you so much. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I certainly look forward to this deliberation today. I assure you, sir, that the recommendation that would emerge from this seminar today, they will be given highest consideration by the government of Pakistan. Thank you so much.
Thanks, first of all, to Sohail for putting together this panel and inviting me to be here. Certainly privileged to be on the same panel as some of the greats in the profession, people that we have learned from. Yes, I am not quite as old as some of the panelists. So it certainly is a great pleasure to be here. I'm going to focus on, draw on one of the policy notes that we had done as part of the background for the country economic memorandum the World Bank did last year. And the policy note in various forms has also been sort of delivered to the government, the new incoming government, on the policy areas that we think are important, at least in the first instance. Of course, as Sohail said, it's a huge country. Pakistan is a huge country. Lots of issues and many different things that need to be taken care of. But when you're starting to engage in policy and starting to engage in development, you need to start drawing priorities. And of course, there's a great amount of effort that's going in already. And IFPRI's work there is phenomenal in terms of the analytics that's going into the sector and a lot of the details. We have a program that's sort of developing. The World Bank has supported Pakistan for a long time on irrigation issues. Unfortunately, we have not been as engaged on agriculture side, but I think a couple of years ago, for the past 2-3 years, we started to re-engage. We have projects coming up on agriculture competitiveness and other things, other specific issues in Punjab and Sindh, and we're starting to look at other provinces and start to see what needs to be done. And of course, the granularity, what will come out today in a 10-minute presentation, it'll be naive to think we can go into a lot of details. So it might come across as a little too high level, but all of these things can be detailed as we go into the specific issues and getting engaged with the government on what to do, how to do, and so on. So I will today then focus on 3 big issues, and some of these have been touched upon. One basically in broadly, broad brush categorization would be technology, water, and markets. And from this emerge 4 sort of high-level policy areas and the key specific policy recommendations that we had made to the government. As Sohail mentioned, GDP growth in Pakistan, overall GDP growth has been around 5%. Agriculture has been a little bit less, at around 3%. It's been fairly steady, and we'll go and look at it. The structural transformation process is pretty much on its way. People are moving out, and let me preface this by saying this policy note actually draws on a lot of work that IFPRI has done. The CGE models and analysis that Paul and Sohail and others have done, as well as some of the background work that was done for the water policy paper with Sherman Robinson. I think Paul was also involved in that. So there's a lot of, we're drawing on a lot of different analytics. So there is a fair amount of detailed analysis behind this, and it's all given in the background papers. So the labor seems to be moving out of agriculture, at least agriculture per se, and it's now down to about 40%, which is still substantial. It's not a small number of people. But a key characteristic of Pakistan agriculture is the inequality in land. 60% of the people do not own land. So there's a high concentration of land in a relatively small proportion of the people. And when people are getting out of agriculture, the question is, where are they going? I think this is an important issue with structural transformation. You want them to be absorbed in high, good paying, good, highly productive jobs. And it's not clear that is happening. Some of the people are going back as landless farmers, meaning they're leasing land in. About 10% of actually numbers in the figure basically give you the level of poverty. And it shows that the people who are coming out of agriculture, who don't have land, are not necessarily doing better. In the US and in developing economies, when people are coming out of agriculture, they're going into high-end services and so on. That is not the case as yet in Pakistan. So the rural non-farm economy, which looms large, 50% of the people are in the non-agriculture sector, but the poverty rate there is around 40%. So something is not quite as smooth as it should be. So that, I think, is an important thing to keep in mind as we move forward. The second issue that comes up, comes up periodically, and it was when this policy note was being written, this debate was still going on in Pakistan, is to do if you have to get rural development, poverty reduction, shared prosperity, what's the best way to do this? Is agriculture the right thing to do, or start focusing on something else? And here, I think the CGA analysis that IFPRI had done is particularly useful. The graph shows that if you if growth originates in different sectors, what is the impact on poverty? Now, obviously, services is a large part of the economy, so if services does better, overall economic growth will go on. But the question is, what is the nature of that growth and who benefits from it, and whether or not the growth is inclusive. And here, what you see is the line is agriculture, and the others are the other sectors. And clearly, the poor, even the urban and rural poor who are not in agriculture, tend to benefit from agricultural growth, crop, as well as livestock. And of course, other things do matter. It's not as if nothing else matters. So the question here was to put the debate back in, it's not either or. I think you're going to have to do both. It's not an issue of focusing on one or the other. It's sort of a, in my view, my personal view, an unproductive debate on whether we do this or that. I think you're going to have to do both if you really want to achieve shared prosperity and try and target reduced poverty. As Sohail mentioned, the agricultural growth has been actually quite low. It's below potential. It's been subpar in the sense that it's much below what it can be. And here, let me just say that I won't be focusing on livestock, largely because we are doing the analytics on that. We haven't quite done the detailed analysis of it. And at the time that the paper was done, we didn't have it. So the discussion today is mostly on the crop sector, which is still a significant part of the economy, but also reflects a lot of major issues as far as food security and sustainability of agricultural growth are concerned. The concern that has emerged in the 2000s is a slowdown in the agricultural growth rate. And over time, when you see a very specific sharp downturn in just post-2000, and overall the average has been around 3%. The important silver lining is that the volatility has declined substantially in post-2000 period, which is an important part. And the other, but the potential, as far as the potential is concerned, that just shows up in the yield gaps. So while it hasn't done well, the silver lining is that there's significant potential to grow through increasing yields. There are significant yield gaps even with existing technology that we have. So there's tremendous potential for growth. All of this translates into issue number one. I mentioned 3 issues, we'll highlight 3 issues. Issue number 1 is slowing productivity. And the key thing that you want, the health of the agricultural system is in the TFP, total factor productivity. The question is how effectively are you using your inputs and are you getting more out of it over time or not? And here what you see is growth has been driven a lot by irrigation, but increasingly by inputs. So the question of how your support system is working, how the subsidy system is working, how the other price supports are working, and what impact are they having on agricultural output. The total output, the role of total factor productivity has declined significantly in the last 3 decades. Right now it's contributing the least in terms of the 3 major inputs. Land, of course, is constant, which is to be expected. It's a land-constrained economy. Now, and I think the ambassador had mentioned that earlier the big contribution in the past was, and it has to be, I should highlight that in the 1980s, Pakistan was doing extremely well. If you go back and look, Pakistan's TFP growth rates were higher than China and Brazil at that time. Or they were almost at par as Brazil, but they were actually doing as well as China back in the 1980s. So it's not as if it can't be done. It has been done before. And yes, we are facing some challenges as far as the technology is concerned in terms of the new generation technology coming on. And Derek has written a lot about this. But still, there remains significant potential. I think much more can be done to improve, get more out of what is going on in the agriculture sector than we seem to be getting out of it at the moment. And the key there is, of course, going back to the research system. And going into the research and looking at TFP and going into finding technologies, one major problem that seems to be facing Pakistan is a declining share of expenditures on agricultural research. Pakistan is spending less. Perhaps the only other country that's spending less than Pakistan is, in terms of research intensity of research expenditures, is Nepal. Everybody else, even within the South Asia region, is spending more. So this is a big issue. And this sort of shows up both in the technical and human capacity constraints, funding constraints limit what you can do, what kind of people you get, there are low salaries. There are other issues. Money is not the only problem. There are other institutional complexities that need to be addressed in addition to increasing the funding. And a lot of discussion, I think Jock's going to go into a lot more detail on this, so I won't bother in discussing this much more. The second big issue is water, the water use inefficiencies. Pakistan is a semi-arid area. So what you see is the highest intensity of irrigation in the world. 95% of the area is irrigated, simply because you can't do agriculture without irrigation. That water is then critical. And when you look at that over time, the reduced volatility seems to be highly correlated with the convergence of the 2 lines. The 2 lines show the share of irrigated area to cultivated area and the irrigated area to harvested area, which means more and more of the harvested area is, cultivated area is being harvested, which means it's largely through irrigation. That's the outcome of irrigation. So irrigation has expanded, but even though irrigation is important and it has contributed significantly, there's huge inefficiencies in the irrigation system. And we've done a significant amount of analysis on this. We've been engaged in this on the institutional reform side, but much more needs to be done. And just to give you an example, the seepage losses in the irrigation system are 61%. Starting from 106 MAF, that's million feet, acre feet of water at the head, at the start of the irrigation system. By the time it reaches, is utilized for crop use, only 41 MAF is used. 61% is lost at various stages of the irrigation delivery system. Then, of course, this is the surface water. You have associated issues with groundwater, with the groundwater levels falling, and what kind of incentives are driving that, I think, needs to be looked at very closely. And of course, climate change. You can't miss climate change. There's a lot of uncertainty about what climate change, the global climate models are showing us. There is a fair amount of consensus on the rising temperatures. It's not clear whether Pakistan will actually lose or gain. There's a huge amount of uncertainty as to what will happen to rainfall. Now, rainfall meaning most of the rainfall is in the mountain in the form of snow. And a very innovative study that was done by the bank jointly with IFPRI was looking at what happens to Indus River waters when in light of climate change. And some simulations were done which basically showed, well, first they estimated how much of the water is coming in. Glaciers, rising temperatures will affect the glaciers, but glaciers, we estimate, contribute only 18% of the water flows into the Indus. Most of the water is coming from snow melt, and if the snow is actually increasing, so we don't see as much of a problem, but again, there's so much uncertainty, we don't know what exactly is likely to happen. But the rising temperature is going to have some impact. I mean, it's not as if it's not going to have impact. 18% of the water still comes from glacier melt, so some of it is definitely going to have an impact. An analysis looking at different options, mitigation options, shows that the canal efficiency improvements will more than reverse the climate change impact. So even if you end up saving 10% of the water, you basically reverse the climate change impact. The new dams as increased storage capacity is the other option, which of course is very important for electricity generation, but it doesn't really do much for mitigating climate impacts. The biggest, I guess, the most interesting finding is the best strategy is to increase yields. Increasing yields by just reducing the current yield gap by 20% will basically not only reverse overcome the climate impact, but actually lead to additional growth. And of course, if all three are done, you get much better outcomes. The focus, the recommendation then is, as far as climate change is concerned for agriculture, canal efficiency and cereal yields, which goes back to technology, seem to be the main areas for focus. The main constraints on water side are on the institutional side, and much has been written about the Varabandi system and the problems with the RBI, the water charges. The water charges are based on acreage, not on crops or value of crops. So the rice people basically pay the same as any other crop, and they end up overusing because they're basically being undercharged. They're not being charged in terms of use. And there's a lot of detail on what needs to be done. It's a slow institutional process, reform process, and there's also now additional complications with the devolution that's taking place down to the provincial levels. And a lot of this is discussed in some of the background reports. Again, I won't go into too much detail. And the last is markets. Markets means trade, both internal and domestic, international and domestic trade. On the international side, Pakistan was doing quite well. After 1996, the liberalization and the reforms started to move the biases against agriculture, started to reduce the biases against agriculture. But post-2006, there seemed to have been a lot of backsliding and reversal of reforms. And mostly, and the anti-agricultural bias, the domestic bias, which is a relative rate of resistance, seems to have started to fall again. And also the international net rate of assistance, which is the international trade, the bias against distortion of incentives against farmers, basically taxing farmers, has also started to increase. And the major crops, surprisingly, when you look at the data, it may not seem like there's too much support or other things going on, but when you do the numbers, the major crops like wheat, rice, sugar, and cotton appear to be significantly taxed implicitly. Now, one of the things that the domestic pricing policy, which is a procurement of rice, procurement of wheat, is the distortionary impacts it has on farmer choice, largely through land allocation. Wheat is not as high-value agriculture. Fruits and vegetables are rapidly emerging, and this shows a rapid increase in exports, although the volume is actually quite low. It looks impressive in terms of the growth, but overall, it remains significantly below potential. Much more can be done. Wheat procurement policies tend to distort the prices and basically keep the farmers. Right now, and actually I was surprised to see, this is pretty much like what's happening in India, who have a similar procurement system. There it is for both rice and wheat. Is that the area under, even though the value of agricultural wheat output is falling, area under wheat seems to be increasing. It's now close to 60%. And it's directly the prices are high and the prices are stabilized. So that creates a significant disincentive for farmers to diversify out of wheat into other commodities. So the main issue there is refocus on policy reforms, and one of the main one of the main issues that has emerged since 2006 is the SROs, which basically create a lot of uncertainty and ad hoc, sort of introduce a lot of ad hocism into the issuing of orders and permits to import-export of trade. That seems to be a big issue that is reversing a lot of the trade incentives and creating a lot of uncertainty. And wheat procurement policies, of course, need to be revisited, and we'll have some specifics on what to say. Coming back to the policy actions, I won't go into the details, but basically here, and John's going to talk a lot more about this, is the reform, there's a need for fundamental reforms. And the government is actually quite serious. I was in Brazil with a delegation from PARC and the Secretary of Agriculture to look at how Embrapa is doing, and they're quite serious in undertaking serious, significant reforms of the National Agricultural Research System, and hopefully that will move forward. It requires fundamental reforms, both from the organizational perspective, to bring in the devolution down to human resource reforms in terms of incentives and performance incentives and so on. As a huge agenda, it's going to be slow and long, but it needs to be initiated and stay the course. The second is on water efficiency. Here, again, there's no blueprint for this, but basically slow institutional reforms, building capacity, and putting in adequate financial resources and other things, and capacity building resources for building of the provincial and farmer organizations, water user associations, to start to have them start managing the water much more efficiently. The third is removal of all the SROs, and taking a relook at what needs to be done to make the trade policy environment much more predictable and simplified. And of course, look for alternative WTO compliant measures that may be needed to protect national security interests, rather than bringing in ad hoc and unpredictable measures. And finally, on wheat procurement policy, the idea there would be to reduce the level of procurement. Again, there's a lot of political economy associated with this. There's a lot of food security issues, but some of these issues can be handled and can be managed. We are in discussion with several countries, and I'm sure, and of course Paul and others have done a lot of work on this. There are ways to manage this process and transition into a much more efficient and less distortionary regime for achieving food security, and simply figuring out how to deal with the storage and procurement problems in a much better way. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Excellency, friends and colleagues, and Sahel, thank you very much for thinking of your old buddy to join this happy event. Let me start with a bit of history. That's what we old guys tend to do as we age. I like the way that the early strong US-Pakistan cooperation in the general field of research was mentioned by a couple of speakers already. Personally, I started to get involved with Pakistan in the 80s as part of the World Bank missions supporting the development of the still fledgling agricultural research system of that era. And the Americans were consistently helpful right through that process too, and they're staying the course, and I hope may actually re-energize themselves in this regard. I was also witness to a phase where the CGIAR became much more active in Pakistan, and particularly, as Sahel mentioned, Derek Barley himself was running the CIMIT economics program from Islamabad in the late 80s. Derek appeared again in another one of his lives in a for me, a very significant joint FAO World Bank Government of Pakistan review of the ag research system. That was completed in 2002, and as best I can see, it was essentially filed away in a dusty bookshelf, and which I think was a tragic under attention to a very important set of issues that had been raised in that review. And I'm predicting, I haven't spoken to him yet, that Derek may yet reflect on that in his discussion remarks today. Again, I got engaged in this next funny looking thing, ITPE, that's the Independent Third Party Evaluation, which was conducted by IFPRI with assistance from USAID to undertake it. I had the honour of chairing that evaluation, and it didn't take us long to discover that all the real jewels of intellectual input were already on hand from the FAO 2002 review, so we were largely rediscovering the wheel. However, we've been fortunate that the Pakistan authorities and some of the donors have been quite helpful in taking forward from what we thought were the key lessons of that, and I'll mention a bit more later. Along the way, the Americans wisely have supported something called AIP, Agricultural Innovation Program. This was launched in 2013, and I think is a really significant step in terms of improving the efficiency of the national system in Pakistan. At the national level, the new and current chairman, our friend Iftikhar, has managed to successfully revive the old-style national coordinated research programs, which I think will be a very significant step in modernising the approach to ag research. Along with some help from FAO, the PARC system, the National Ag Research System, has developed a 5-year business plan now, which is in the process of being implemented. And this is, I think, has good prospects of effectively strengthening many aspects of the PARC system. Well, research is a risky business, and it's not an aspect I want to dwell on too much today. But in Pakistan, we've seen from the history that indeed it's pretty risky to run an efficient research enterprise over time in changing government policies. I'm pleased that Madhur nicely pointed to the continued significant underinvestment by Pakistan in its national systems. It's a bit embarrassing, I think, that Pakistan should be sitting at the bottom of that heap in South Asia. And as a footnote, I should say, at the moment I'm working in former East Pakistan, where things are actually going pretty well in ag research. And I think Pakistan can look not only to Brazil and other places, but also to its former partners in the East. Well, I think, to cut a long story short, I think the prospects for successfully investing in agricultural knowledge generation and new technologies to boost the productivity of farming in Pakistan are really high. But of course it naturally does depend on the efficiency with which that whole system works. So, just to remind us that I think globally, and Madhur has already pointed to some of this, that it's very important for countries to maintain and in most cases increase their investment in agricultural R&D, because it does actually generate high social returns. But it's a sad thing to note that in today's international economy, it's really only Brazil and China that are really doing that to an enviable extent. it's really good to know that the Pakistanis are linking up with Embrapa in Brazil to see interesting ways of going forward. And I hope that out of that collaboration, good things will come. I guess for the Brazilians, they have other international priorities than Pakistan probably, so it might take some greasing of the wheels to make that collaboration effectively going down the track. Maduro nicely pointed also to the significant yield gaps that have been identified, and I remind us of some of the PARC analysis of that in my next slide. There's obviously a need to strengthen agricultural R&D to bring Pakistan up to really competitive levels of performance. And as I said, the scope is considerable and the opportunities are great, and I think that's going to ultimately work to achieve some of these broader social objectives that have been mentioned for the sector in Pakistan. There's a lot of dynamism in the political circumstances in which ag research is conducted, and in particularly all the changes that are associated with the 18th Institutional Amendment are going to cause considerable challenge for doing things in a useful way. This is just a picture of the infamous yield gaps, which I don't think, even though these are rather dated now from 2011, I think pretty much the same situation prevails. So a lot of scope and much to be done. Well, let me reflect briefly on spill-ins associated with international agricultural research, and here I'm exploiting concepts nicely charted by my countryman Julian Alston. And this really gets back to the various international links that Pakistan has been trying to forge. I'm very pleased, I mentioned the last bullet here of the AIP work will, I think, be very significant in bringing together some key players, not just the old friend CIMMYT, but also the University of California, Davis, and the Asian Vegetable Research and Development Center in Taiwan, which I think will be an interesting, I should have not have ignored IRI, an old friend of Pakistan also. But together, I think this USAID supported initiative will be really absolutely vital to bringing the game of research in Pakistan up to the speed that it needs to be. And in that way reduce the risks that have been suffered in the past. I should just not forget to mention also that the private sector in ag research in Pakistan has been systematically under-attended for far too long, and I think the mood is right now for that to be changed and to develop more successful partnerships with the private sector. So this is the gang of friends in the AIP. So what are the opportunities and challenges for that AIP program? I think it's, let me get the whole picture here. I think the current initiatives that I've mentioned briefly in Pakistan follow all the right, are following all the right paths towards doing a better job of being effective and efficient. The dualistic farm structure of Pakistan creates particular difficulties for public agencies to effectively engage with small-scale farmers, and the current momentum in PARC is to do a better job on that, although the overt and important role of the large-scale farmers in the research system continues to be very important. The governance arrangements of the national system have been nicely improved in the last couple of years. It's still, in many cases, a work in progress, and some of the difficulties, such as the quality of human resources that have been allowed to somewhat degrade through the systematic underfunding in recent decade or so will take quite a while to address through new training programs, in-service training programs, better international linkages supported by travel grants to enable Pakistani researchers to engage much more effectively with the cutting edge of international global scientific knowledge. So lots to be done there, but it is actually happening, and ultimately I think will generate the desired outcomes and improve food security as well as poverty alleviation through the sector. So I think I've already touched on some of these points, so I may save a little time here. Let me just check. So I think I've touched on those rather challenging issues of human resource capacity redevelopment. And unfortunately, I'd like to say that the World Bank is being highly attentive to the opportunities for assisting Pakistan in this regard. And I should have actually asked Madhur, but I don't think there's anything in the mill to address that particular set of constraints as vigorously as would probably be justified. So, I've mentioned most of this in my rambling exposition. I'm figuring you can read faster than I can. So, okay, so I think all that are brief points related to the many reform operations that are underway in the new park and its constituent institutions. There's a long way to go, but I think the present staffing of the park is really committed to doing this in an aggressive way. The AIP is only a 4-year project, which is a very short time to do what needs to be done, but hopefully that will translate into a longer term operation as well. For the park in-house operations, the chairman, who was nicely, I think, and appropriately appointed by the president, has only 2 years in his post-retirement new assignment to get the park fixed up. So he will need all the very best of luck to pull that off. I think his business plan, which you can download on the park site at the moment, is ambitious, realistic and achievable. So I would like, even though he's not here to share the thought, I'd like to wish him and his staff in the park and the related institutions around the country, particularly those in the provinces that are relatively weak in institutional capacity, the very best of luck in pulling off this, implementing this business plan. Thank you very much for your attention.